Okay, so let's get started. We're going to be taking a look at understanding our transient fueling in our Gen 3 Coyote programming. Now, the transient fueling is used to account for airflow changes coming into our engine when we're not in steady state conditions. So normally a mass airflow or speed density, it'll be able to register the airflow in a steady state environment. So if we're idle, part throttle, even at wide open throttle, the airflow is going to be relatively constant. It can characterize that, it can model it. But if we get into a situation where we have a really large throttle change, we have a burst of airflow entering our engine, that's going to be temporary. And we'll find that the steady state airflow registration is not going to be enough to characterize the fueling demand in that specific situation. So we need to have some fuel delivered above and beyond what we're coming from our normal fuel mass is equal to air mass divided by target air fuel calculation. So this is going to be adding on top of whatever the steady state airflow would be, and to give us a brief period where we have a richer fueling mixture to account for that large airflow ingestion or burst coming into the motor. Let's jump in here. Let's open up a stock file. Let's take a look at where we can expect to find the transient tables, talk about what they represent, and we're going to be using our VCM scanner. I'm going to go and show you some examples of what you can expect if you're editing the Excel tables and kind of the result you're going to get. So how the injector pulse width is going to change based on the gain or the time constant tables. All right, let's jump in here. Let's go to File. Let's go to Open. Let's open up any stock file in here. I'll go ahead and open up a 2020 Mustang GT manual stock. And we're going to move over here into the Engine tab and go from General over here to Fuel. And then from Fuel, we're going to go here to our Transient tab. We have both acceleration and deceleration areas here. So the acceleration is going to allow us to account for a burst of airflow entering the engine through a rate of change in our throttle movement. The deceleration is going to be the opposite of that. So if we have a throttle opening and all of a sudden we snap the throttle shut, we'll find that there's going to be some fuel that's going to be stuck onto the intake port, spraying from the port injectors, and it's not going to make its way into the engine on that engine cycle. So the next engine cycle, there'll be residual fuel left over, and as a result, we're going to have an overly rich condition. So what's happening with the deceleration tables, it's actually going to be pulling fuel out and doing the opposite of the acceleration. Normally, we do not need to edit the deceleration tables. Anytime I've ever had to edit anything in here, it's always been either the gain or time constant under the acceleration, just for reference sake. Now, let's talk about how this actually works. If we go here, we have a gain and a time constant table. The gain table here is based on engine speed versus manifold absolute pressure. Now, your table here may be listed in inches of mercury. I've switched my table over here to units of kPa. You want to go ahead and switch the units. All you need to do is just right click here. Go back in here. Right click on your axes, go here to column axes, go here to units, and switch it from inches of mercury to kilopascals. I find it's just easier to work in units of kPa, a little bit easier to understand in that situation because 100 here is atmospheric pressure, and then 20 would be very low engine vacuum, or the engine pulling a lot of vacuum, and then anywhere between that is going to be between the two extremes. So these values in the table are going to be acting as a multiplier to internal calculations that it's going to try to figure out how much it needs to add for additional pulse width when it's called on to have the fueling added in a transient condition. So this acts as a volume knob, or acts, you can think of it as a multiplier. The higher the value, the higher the multiplier, the more it's going to be increasing the pulse width. Then we also have a time constant table here. Time constant, engine speed versus manifold pressure again. Now we can see the units in here are inches of mercury. Let me go ahead and change this. So click on the axes here, go to column, go to units, go to kPa. Now the time constant is going to be a time factor. It's going to be how long the fueling stays in for. So if we increase the values in our time constant table, we're going to expect that the fueling is going to hang for a little bit longer period of time after we've injected the fuel. So we can actually stretch how long the additional fuel is being added. So the gain is going to give us more fuel added. The time constant is going to stretch out the time that we keep that fueling added in for a transient event. Now we also have our gain at startup and time constant at startup. I typically don't edit these. These tables vary a little bit from our normal, let's say our gain startup compared to our gain table. This is going to be engine runtime versus engine coolant temperature. What we can find here is that if we get up to normal warm temperature and we see here something about 130, 250 seconds of runtime. That's after it's fired off. We'll find that the table here is 0. 0 means it's not going to be adding any further gain modifier to our normal gain table. So these two are cumulative. It'll start to increase and have more of a multiplying effect. The two will add together essentially and then multiply what the pulse was going to be to add additional fueling in. So one trend that you can find here is that the colder engine coolant temperature, right after the engine fires off, it's going to have a higher gain or multiplier there. That's pretty normal. And then as we start to get up to normal operating temperature here, 180, 200, 220 degrees, we'll find that it has still for the first few seconds after the engine's trying to stabilize, it'll have a higher multiplier, but it does essentially fade its way out to have no multiplier where it's just running on the normal gain table. So this gives it the ability to account for engine start off. So the first. Thanks for checking out our teaser clip. If you want to see the rest of this video and more than 500 hours of current EFI training we have to offer, make sure you click right here. If you want to go and check out more teaser clips from this training course, click here. And you don't want to miss any of the videos we're going to be releasing on this channel, so make sure you subscribe and click here. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys later.